The 1990s were a true boom period in racetrack construction. All over the country, new speedways were being built at a rapid pace. Around the same time, Walt Disney World was undergoing expansion themselves, with the recent opening of MGM Studios, many resorts, new water parks, and the planning of Animal Kingdom. On the surface, these two industries, theme parks and racetracks, shouldn't have much in common. But in this one case, they teamed up to create something truly unique, but something that did not exactly last very long. So what gave the Disney company the great idea to build an actual racetrack on their property? Today, I will dive into the history of the Walt Disney World Speedway, its short-lived history, and its eventual abandonment. We must first talk about what directly led to this track coming into existence. In the sport of IndyCar racing, tensions had been bubbling over for some time between the team owners that made up Championship Auto Racing Teams, or CART, which sanctioned the IndyCar series, and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway management, which controlled the Indy 500, the greatest spectacle in racing. It came as somewhat of a shock when Indy president Tony George announced his intention to form the Indy Racing League as an alternative to CART. His intention to create an all-oval schedule with American drivers, as opposed to the diverse CART series, rankled people to no end, but he called everyone's bluff and went through with the new series. IndyCar racing was now split in two, and both sides had their factions of fans and believers. It was totally a power grab at CART's expense, but George was now in the deep end, and he had a series to run. Of course, coming up with an entire racing series on short notice meant George had to come up with a schedule. With many oval tracks across America locked into their contracts with CART, NASCAR, or both, George found it difficult to fill out a schedule. Sitting on the enormous pot of revenue that the Indianapolis 500 and the 1994 Brickyard 400 NASCAR race had brought in, Tony George just decided to build a new oval, one that didn't have conflicting dates and preferably in a warm weather climate. Luckily for him, Disney CEO Michael Eisner felt the same way. As far back as the mid-1980s, Eisner was thinking about putting a racetrack on Disney property. Walt Disney World, believe it or not, used to have slow seasons with empty parks. Perhaps having a big race that could bring in tens of thousands of people to Disney World during a slow period would help with that. Survey work began in secret in 1994, and on January 23, 1995, it was announced that the Walt Disney World Speedway would be built at the south end of the Magic Kingdom parking lot, and it would host the inaugural race of the new Indy Racing League on January 27, 1996. Was this going to be a literal Mickey Mouse track for a Mickey Mouse series, or was this something that was going to change the game forever? The design and construction was done by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in conjunction with Walt Disney Imagineering. It was to be a uniquely shaped D-shaped oval that followed the ring roads of the Magic Kingdom parking lot. Certainly a different layout, not a lot of banking. It was built with Indy cars in mind, but only being a mile in length, it was going to have that bull ring feel. Really, only the track itself, the retaining walls and catch fences were permanent. Everything else was temporary, much like you'd find on a street course. It was a different approach, but one that was necessary to shrink the footprint of the track, being that it was in a high traffic area of Walt Disney World. The whole ordeal was supposed to be a win-win for both Disney and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It would allow the IRL's first race to be on a brand new track in a destination location. It helped that the race would be shown live on ABC, which at this point was now owned by Disney. To add on to that, the race would be held the day before the Super Bowl, as ABC attempted to draw in a new audience for the new series. Tony George got his new racetrack, and Michael Eisner got his big event for Walt Disney World during the slow season. That first race in 1996 was won by Buzz Calkins, and remained on the IRL calendar through the year 2000. It also held a NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series event in 1997 and 1998. Teams like to use the track as a testing ground during the off-season due to the warmer Florida weather, but the track also had a dark side. Its odd shape led to the track having some tough angles in the event of an accident. In 1997, Eliseo Salazar fractured his back and Davy Jones broke his neck. But sadly, the worst accident happened in 2000, when Sam Schmidt was left paralyzed after a testing crash. This was just before the safer barrier, which was developed by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, came into use. The track also created a parking nightmare for guests on race day. Both race attendees and Magic Kingdom attendees were forced into the same adjacent lot, backing things up further. Disney tried to rectify this by only allowing fans attending the race to park at the Magic Kingdom. If you just happened to be going to the Magic Kingdom on race day, Disney forced you to park at Epcot instead and take a bus or the monorail over. I'm sure that went over like a lead balloon amongst your average park goer. When this didn't work, the next year, Disney made the race fans park at Epcot and take the bus or monorail over. But Disney didn't have the amount of buses needed for all the race fans, so an outside shuttle service had to be brought in, clogging up the roads into and out of the parking lots even more. Logistically, the racetrack was a nightmare. Yet Disney still had hope, and plans were even drawn up to build a permanent oval somewhere else on Disney property that would be less congested and not interfere with parking at one of the 4 parks. But sadly, this never came to fruition. The January race date before the Super Bowl also had its share of issues, with teams not being ready to start the season that early. The IRL wanted to move the race to Labor Day, but Disney liked having it in January outside of peak season. A race date could not be agreed on for 2001, and it fell off the IRL schedule for good, never to return. The track hung on through 2015, hosting the Richard Petty driving experience, a supercar driving experience, and playing host to various NASCAR and IndyCar private tests. However, with those 2 series cracking down on the amount of private testing, the track surely stopped bringing in whatever profit it was still doing, and Disney made the decision to raze the track to the ground. A new and improved Magic Kingdom parking lot entrance came soon after in its place. From 1996 through 2015, the Walt Disney World Speedway offered a unique time capsule into 1990s Disney, and auto racing for that matter. I still can't believe that this track ever existed. The overall idea was a little too goofy, no pun intended. The Indy 200 was meant to be a cornerstone for the young IRL, but the track didn't have much staying power on the schedule. A racetrack that had the backing of the Disney Company and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway surely should have been a huge success. I think Tony George and Michael Eisner saw quick dollar signs, but overall the project ran into too many logistical problems to be feasible long term. It's a shame too, because it was actually a really fun idea that could have only happened in the 1990s. The Mick Yard, as it was known, was short-lived from a competitive standpoint, but had its place in Walt Disney World and racing history. Do you have any memories of this track? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.